You're listening to the Doctor Is In podcast. This is the show where you get the best tips, tricks, and nutritional hacks to help you and your family get healthier. You'll also hear what works and what doesn't work so you don't have to waste your time and money. All right, let's get started.
Hello, I'm Dr. Martin Jr.
And I'm Dr. Martin Sr.
And this is the Doctors In podcast, and this is episode 144. And today we want to talk about a bunch of new studies really that have come out over the last little while on vitamin D. And I guess it's appropriate because as we're recording this, it's kind of the middle of July, absolute heat wave going on in Northern Ontario.
Very unusual.
Yeah, especially for this kind of extended heat. Last summer specifically, I mean, we didn't really have a great summer. It rained a ton. We like to ride motorbikes. It was really a terrible summer.
Yeah, it was cold.
Yeah, it was cold. It was a terrible summer for riding motorbikes. You just couldn't plan anything. Also, there wasn't one heat advisory last year, I think in all of Ontario, if I'm not mistaken. We definitely didn't get any up north. This year, we've pretty much had a heat advisory, it seems like, for the last 2 straight weeks.
Yeah.
So it's been incredible. But what we want to talk about specifically is vitamin D. Like I said, a bunch of new studies have come out, again, further showing just how important vitamin D is to your health. Now, the funny thing is that every once in a while, I'll read an article or I'll read somebody on Twitter or just different blog or whatever talking about how vitamins basically just cause expensive urine, right? I mean, it's just, and you know, when you read that, it's just like, it's almost like they haven't read a journal article in the last, I don't know how many years. There's just so much research being done with various vitamins and nutrients that to make a statement like that's just idiotic. You know, it's just really just stupid is what it is. You could just almost dismiss them right outright. They haven't really read anything. Look how much research the Vitamin D Council puts out on vitamin D alone, and that's just one vitamin, right? So, I mean, they've been studied like crazy. But anyways, without going too far off a tangent, let's talk about a few interesting studies over the last little bit. Now, there's one. Why don't you start off talking about the one in diabetes just to start off with?
Well, they were showing that this is a recent study that on vitamin D, that if your levels were and this is, I think, an American way of measuring vitamin D. Canadians have a little different measurement. But let's just say if people were in the low end of vitamin D levels, and by the way, if you want to know exactly what your numbers are, you probably have to pay for the test, but they have what they call the dehydroxy 25, right, which will tell you what your numbers are. And it's always best to have optimum levels of vitamin D. And again, the population is probably, what were you saying off air, somewhere around 70% of the population is deficient in vitamin D?
One of the latest studies shows that anywhere between 50 and 70% are deficient in vitamin D.
Yeah. So this one, again, and you know, as we go through this today, you'll see that vitamin D, your body, just to give you a little background, almost every cell in your body has a receptor for vitamin D. It's an essential, it's not really a vitamin, it's more of a hormone, but your body needs vitamin D to operate. It just does not operate without it. And so if you're in the low levels, and this one is with diabetes, that if you're in the low levels of vitamin D, which 70% of the population is, they have a 53% increase in their susceptibility to have type 2 diabetes, which is insulin, right? It's an insulin, we always say it. Type 2 diabetes, adult onset diabetes, has nothing to do really with blood sugar. It's not a disease. That's only a symptom of diabetes. But if you have type 2 diabetes, you have insulin resistance because that's the cause. And yet there seems to be a huge link between vitamin D and insulin, because if you have low levels of vitamin D, you're 53% more likely to be a diabetic, type 2 diabetic. So it's just like I said, every cell in your body, obviously your pancreatic cells, guess what? They need vitamin D to operate properly. And it's incredible.
Well, and one of the interesting things about vitamin D, and there was a study done on this actually not too long ago, was vitamin D is one of those things that if you're low for a short amount of time, right? Because vitamin D is something that, you really should be getting a dosage of vitamin D every day. We're really meant as humans to be in the sun, right? We're really meant to get sun every day. That's how we're made. And, we live in a northern climate. Right now, it's fantastic. It's awesome. It's easy to go out in the sun. However, for 6 months of the year, it's very difficult.
Or more.
It's very difficult to get vitamin D, because if you've heard us before on podcasts, then the best way to get vitamin D through the sun is having your arms and legs exposed, right? And, of course, for 6 months of the year in the north, where our arms and legs are definitely not exposed, so we typically run vitamin D deficient throughout the winter for sure. And also, everybody is so scared of the sun nowadays that they throw on their arms and legs, they throw on sunblock, and what happens is it affects their ability to get vitamin D. It's not getting absorbed properly, and so it creates this real systemic vitamin D deficiency. But anyways, what researchers have always kind of figured was vitamin D deficiency is a problem when it becomes a chronic thing. So you become vitamin D deficient over a long period of time, right? Because if you spend a couple of days not going in the sun and you're not taking any vitamin D, your vitamin D levels are going to dip down. There's no question. But it becomes a problem when this goes on for a period of time. So studies have actually looked at the effect that happens over a period of time in your body for months at a time. And it's not good. It really isn't good. It affects muscles and even grip strength. They were testing all these things. And as you mentioned, we're really meant, it's funny. I'm a comic guy, right? Grew up reading comic
comedian?
books. Yeah,
or
no, not a funny guy, no, in any way. But yeah, just comic books, right? I grew up reading comic books. And for example, Superman draws his power from the sun, right? And whenever he's in trouble, if he can get into the sun, it's going to rejuvenate. It's going to kind of fix him up, right? It's funny because that's really how we are as humans. The sun fixes a lot.
Yeah. Well, when do you feel better?
Well, you feel, and that's the thing, right? Like we're really circadian creations, right? We're meant to sleep at nighttime and we're meant to get some sun in the daytime. You do those two things consistently. If you consistently sleep, right around 8 hours every night, and you consistently get vitamin D every day, you're generally going to be a lot healthier than somebody who doesn't do those things, right? That's just the way we are, right? A lot of health problems that we see in society today are people who are not sleeping properly, and then they run really bad on vitamin D. Then you throw in insulin issues because of the food they're eating, and it just it really forms the foundation for almost every disease that's out there. It really does. That's an interesting study about the vitamin D. And then, I got another one here that it came out not too long ago. And what it does is it actually looked at, the question they asked was, does a high dose vitamin D increase cognition? This is actually an interesting study because it looked at the comparison between a high dose, which they considered a high dose, which is funny. But for study purposes, this is actually a much higher dosage than they typically use, which was 4,000 IUs of vitamin D was the high dose. And then they gave a low dose, which is 400 IUs, right?
Which used to be the recommended vitamin D.
Yes.
Right? In supplements. Or
yeah, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, crazy.
Which is ridiculous. And even the new recommended daily, you can go look this up. You can Google it. The new recommended daily amount was based on bad math. It's very low. It was a miscalculation. I got an email this last week from a good friend of ours, and he was talking about his wife, and two questions was his wife was feeling a little bit better. She had been taking B12 and vitamin D, but her doctor told her to stop both of them. And he wrote saying, hey, now she's not feeling as good. And, what should you do? And it's like, well, the obvious answer is we'll get back taking those things, right? But the reality is that doctors are scared of vitamin D for whatever reason. I don't understand it. But anyways.
Well, it's fat soluble, right? In their head, because it's a fat soluble vitamin, you can accumulate it.
But how long do you have to take a ridiculously high amount before it actually causes an issue?
6 months. This is studies. 6 months, every day, 7 days a week, of 50,000 international units of vitamin D3, it will become toxic.
Yeah, and ain't got no time. Who's got time for that?
Come on. Who's taking 50,000 every day of vitamin D?
Which is funny because if I, in the wintertime, feel any kind of flu, coming on or cold coming on or chest, I'll take like 30, 40,000 IUs for 4 or 5 days in a row, and it's like, man, it's magic.
Yeah.
Just it does a great, for me personally, that's what I do for myself. But anyways, going back to the study, what they did is they looked at 400 IUs versus 4,000. And of course, they found in the high dosage, it actually improved performance of cognition, but not on the low dosage. So again, the bottom line is that most people don't get enough vitamin D. Yeah. And when they do take vitamin D, they just don't get enough of it, right? So if you're going to supplement with vitamin D, get the right amount. So the high dose, which was 4,000 international units per day for 18 weeks, improved cognition. They benefited from higher doses, is what they said. So, and then they found, especially for those who are chronically under or low in blood D levels, right? So that's another study there that was done that was pretty interesting as well. And here's one more little quick study, again, on vitamin D, which they found, again, that a large portion of IBS sufferers are deficient in vitamin D.
Yeah.
In fact, they found in the study 82% of IBS sufferers had low vitamin D3. Makes sense.
Yeah.
It really does. Because, and it's kind of like, it's kind of like the chicken or the egg. Because if you have IBS, you know that person, and listen, I got a long history of IBS. A person with IBS has a real disproportion of bad bacteria to good. Their gut's a mess.
Yeah.
Their microbiome is a mess.
Yeah.
In order to get vitamin D properly, you need a healthy microbiome. So it kind of only makes sense that somebody with IBS would have a low D3 as well.
It's like B12, right? We always talk about, when we talk about B12, you need to have perfect digestion in order for you to absorb B12, right? Because we've done this on podcasts before. And vitamin D is similar, right? Even though it's a fat-soluble vitamin, you need to have a good gut. And if the amount of good bacteria and if you're losing that battle inside your gut between good and bad, you're not absorbing this fat-soluble vitamin called vitamin D, and every cell in your body needs it. So the significance of that is very important.
Now, you had mentioned a study as well that just came out on colon cancer.
Yeah, and again, this is just reinforcing older studies that show, again, the link between low levels of vitamin D, almost without exception, is anybody that gets colon cancer has low levels of vitamin D. That's the conclusion of studies that confirm older studies of the importance of vitamin D, even, again, for protecting the body from cancer. And we know that even think about the flu, okay? So let's just go back to the winter time. Is it the bugs that are around in the winter, or is it the soil, or is it the host? You know what I mean? Like I always tell people, well, I think we live around bugs all year round. I think it's just because in the summertime, you get outside, you see that you get in the sun, and your immune system is much, much better in the summer than it is in the winter. It just, you want to take your flu shot in the fall. That's what they're saying.
Well,
why is that?
And the funny thing is this, and this is something that a lot of people kind of forget. Not every bug is 100% contagious, right? In a sense, what do I mean by that? Because that can be kind of a confusing thing to say. Think of all the people that get exposed to a bug in a day, right? And what percentage of those people that get exposed to it actually get sick? Because, think about it. If you introduce a bacteria to an area, a sterile area, it just spreads so fast. It just, everything you touch, and, you can't even think about it, how fast it spreads. So when a bug comes around, when flu season comes around, you get exposed to it. Yeah. It's not, if you don't get sick that winter, it's not because you didn't get exposed to the flu bug. The flu bug's everywhere. When it starts to spread, it's everywhere. Yeah. So it's not like you managed to avoid exposure. That's idiotic. Yeah. That's not how it works. The fact is that your body was able to fight it off, and that's the thing. So if you put 10 people in a room and you introduce the flu into that room, not all 10 people are going to get it. Yeah. Those, though, that their systems are weak at that point, run down, tired.
Lack of sleep.
Yeah, lack of sleep, weak immune system because of low vitamin D levels. a whole bunch of different reasons. They're going to allow that to take a hold in them, and it's going to affect them, and it's going to go from there.
So it's not the bug, it's the host, right?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's the host.
Yeah.
And in the wintertime, as you mentioned, we are more susceptible because our immune system is weaker because our blood D3 levels are much weaker.
Yeah. And they're not any better in Florida, about getting the flu. I always laugh because when I'm in Florida in the winter and I see them advertising the flu shot in the pharmacies in Florida, I'm always laughing. I say, just get outside.
Hey, just walk outside.
Just walk outside. But you see, Floridians, my neighbors, you call it death row down there. Hey, we're seniors. And Tony Jr. calls it death row.
Well,
Dad, you live on death row. Well, thanks a lot.
Well, it's only because every time I'm down there, you point out all the people who've died recently. So it's just like one of those things that it just seems like when we're sitting out in the morning having a coffee and we're looking down and you start pointing out, well, that guy there died this summer. I'm like, well, you live in death row.
Anyway, but the thing is, most of my Florida neighbors, and I love them dearly, they never get in the sun.
Oh, you never see them.
No. Because the sun, they're scared of it. Like, it's just unbelievable, Only the crazy Canadians are at the beach. Everybody else. Anyway, I can't believe it. Like, they're taking the flu shot in Florida. Like, are you kidding me?
Well, I remember reading just kind of like a paper on a surfer in California who was in the sun every day and was shocked to learn that he had low D3 levels. But it's because he wore suntan lotion or sunblock every day, right? He just never gave his body a chance to absorb it. So he was absolutely shocked when he learned that he was low in D3. So, I mean, it's a problem everywhere.
Sunblock works,
Oh, yeah, sunblock does its job.
It does its job, but you're not getting vitamin D if you use it.
No, and I mean, there are some other real serious problems that if you go into the sun with a chemical and expose it to heat, and you put it on the largest organ that you have. So, I mean, that caused a lot of problems. All right, let's talk real fast about 3 other studies that kind of on vitamin D that kind of caught my attention. One goes back to, again, dealing with just cognitive decline. This one found, it was a fairly large study, and what it did, it linked low levels of D to rapid and profound decrease in cognition. So think about that for a second. As we age, we tend to get less D3. We tend to absorb less D3. Our bacteria in our gut changes for the worse, so it creates this like perfect storm for less D3 in our day, and that can trigger a faster mental decline, because one thing we can say for sure is your brain needs D3 to be healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of studies that show various aspects of what happens when you got low D3 levels, right? So you need a healthy brain. You need a good amount of vitamin D3. So that's one study. And what I want to just kind of end this podcast talking about is kind of a dynamic duo. Now, you and I have talked about another dynamic duo in the past, which is there seems to be a special combination when you include omega-3 fatty acids, specifically DHA and curcumin, right? Curcumin and DHA, a lot of research. It's amazing how many studies are out there showing that they're just like a dynamic duo, which is why I take our DHA with our curcumin together at the same time, just based off those studies. Just helps absorb the curcumin even more, and it just seems like it just supercharges both of them. But on the same note, there are some really interesting studies when you combine vitamin D and omega-3 fatty acids. A lot of studies have looked at what happens when you combine the effects of vitamin D and omega-3 fatty acids. And so here's one where that combination of the two were given for 6 weeks in people that had basically gestational diabetes. And they found it was awesome at stabilizing blood glucose levels, serum insulin levels, also helped improve insulin-resistant markers. I mean, it did everything across the board. So, I mean, the combination of D and omega-3, very, very good for glycemic control, which, again, makes sense.
Yeah,
it makes sense. And here's another one that was just published, in fact, like about not even 2 weeks ago, and it was done in patients with MS, and they did the same thing. They gave them a high dose. So this was a high dose of omega-3 fatty acid and vitamin D. So they gave them a high dose of both. And again, in the study, they actually gave them a lot of D3, like 50,000 IUs biweekly. So it was a good amount. I like that. In my opinion, they probably could have given them a higher dose of omega-3, but they gave a real good dose of D3 for sure. And what they found is it helped across the board, especially when it came to what they call the EDSS, which is the Expanded Disability Status Scale. So basically, it had a positive effect on all that stuff and their metabolic status. So again, take vitamin D, take omega-3s, which is something you should be doing every day anyways, right? Omega-3, vitamin D3, and B12 are kind of those nutrients, and magnesium are kind of those single nutrients that we really like, right? It kind of has a positive impact on.
Well, and just one thing clinically, just to end the podcast, and that is, I often, when patients come in, especially seniors, and they come in and they're not steady on their feet, and which is quite common, by the way. I just tell them, oh, by the way, what we're going to find is you're going to have low levels of vitamin D. So just for, like you talked about the grip strength, muscle strength, and people waste away without vitamin D. And, they become very unsteady. They're almost like they're on a ship all the time, just rocking, and they're unsteady on their feet. And vitamin D, again, just has such a great, the benefits are legion for vitamin D. They're just, you think of almost anything you can think of, and vitamin D helps.
So this time of year, go out and get in the sun, but you have a few tips for people that go into the sun, because people are scared of skin cancer. Now, I think that maybe we'll do a podcast on this in the future, but I definitely think there's something that happens to somebody who's insulin resistant. It affects their ability to properly handle the sun. I think that plays a part in it as well. Yeah. I think
comes back to food again, doesn't it?
And that's the thing, right? People always ask, what can they do naturally, as a sunblock in a sense, naturally? Well, another thing we mentioned with food, and we talked about this on a webinar we did at the end when people were asking us questions, is that people don't realize that a lot of the food, especially the high antioxidant type foods, are natural SPFs, right? They provide a little bit of protection for your skin. So those berries, those blueberries and raspberries and all those kind of things can provide a little bit of protection for your skin.
Yeah, I mean, don't go out and burn.
Yeah, so give me your tip.
That's the idea. Well, my tip is this, you get, I can easily get now a good hour of sun without even covering up, easily. Because I've been in the sun, and I was in Florida quite a bit this winter, so my skin is well customized to the sun. But let's say you get 20 minutes of sun. This is just about the right amount. 20 minutes, have your arms and legs exposed if you can, and then cover up. Don't burn. There's no reason to burn. Get in the shade after that and start covering up. Wear a hat. I mean, those are all just common sense things, right? And the other thing I like skin-wise is coconut oil. Just God gave it to us in nature. This is a great oil. Put it on your skin. It's a natural sunscreen. It allows the UVB to come in and blocks the UVA. How do you like that? I mean, the UVA is the dangerous rays of the sun. And so to get your vitamin D, you need your UVB to come in. So coconut oil, you can, but the idea is just don't fry in the sun. Cover up. And that's what I find to be very effective.
All right, well, I want to thank everyone for listening. If you have any questions, you can email us at info@martinclinic.com. You can also get a hold of us. There's a lot of ways you can get a hold of us, really. If you're not a newsletter subscriber, go to our website, martinclinic.com, and sign up for our newsletters. Every Thursday morning, you do a Facebook Live, so people can go in there and ask you a ton of questions there. We also have a private Facebook group that we just started not too long ago. We haven't done a lot with it yet, but we have a lot of exciting things we're going to be doing in the future in there. So you can go to our website as well and join our private Facebook group. We do have our staff in there answering a bunch of questions, and it's just a great way to kind of get your questions answered as well. So again, we want to thank you for listening, and have a great day.